Smartphones have become pocket-sized powerhouses which have not only changed our lives, but changed the world too. We are now more connected than ever before. Not only that, but the device in our pocket or bag can be used for hundreds of everyday tasks, including paying for lunch and watching the latest Netflix show. The Mobile Motion Film Festival is a festival dedicated to selecting and screening films shot purely on smartphones or on action cameras like GoPro. And every year we watch hundreds of films shot using these devices, so we should have some knowledge of which smartphones produce the best looking video. I'm also a smartphone filmmaker myself. I have shot 5 short films or episodes using a Samsung S8, a Samsung S8 Plus and a Samsung S9. So I have had hands-on experience and have encountered most of the issues that come with smartphone filmmaking. I'm going to reveal my choice for best smartphone for video recording. But before I do that, let's have a look at some things that we need to consider when we're thinking about buying a smartphone for the purposes of shooting video. What are the advantages of using a smartphone instead of the DSLR or mirrorless camera? As with every camera you choose, there are pros and there are cons of using the device. Using a smartphone is no different. In addition, the reason for using a smartphone should inform your later decisions when filming. Why not play to the advantages of the chosen device? Smartphones aren't always cheaper than a DSLR, but you have to remember they have hundreds of features that other cameras don't have. If you're going to have a smartphone anyway, then essentially you're getting, well, a free video camera with it. You can't use your DSLR for, online banking or checking Facebook. Well, not yet anyway. Not only is the smartphone camera cheaper, but the extras like lenses, grips, tripods and gimbals, they're cheaper too. A smartphone weighs much less than a DSLR or mirrorless camera. It also takes up far less space. A DSLR weighs about 800 grams, while a smartphone weighs about a quarter of that, about 200 grams. And that's before you add a lens to your camera, while the smartphone comes with a lens, or lenses, included. The size, weight and virtual invisibility of the smartphone makes them ideal for filming on the fly. Because everyone has one, it's much easier to film on the street or in a local cafe without disturbing anyone. It's also very easy to mount or place your smartphone to get certain angles where using a DSLR would take a little bit longer. Smartphones have had millions of dollars invested into making them easy to use. The video they produce out of the box is fine-tuned to look great without having to grade or color correct. In many models, AI has been developed which provides better dynamic range than any DSLR or even higher grade cameras. Of course, filming with a smartphone is not all good news, as DSLRs and mirrorless cameras do some things better. The question is always, what do you want to use your camera for, and in what situations will you use it mostly? But here are some downsides. In general, smartphones produce lower image quality than DSLRs and mirrorless cameras. This is mainly down to the size of the sensor, but is also due to the size of the lens. Manual control means being able to control exposure, focus, and white balance settings of the camera. For example, setting ISO low so as to reduce or remove noise in low light situations. Many phones come with manual control, while others don't. These days, third-party apps allow us to have manual control on our smartphone, but how well they work depends on the phone model, especially with Android phones. If you want that cinematic bokeh and blurry backgrounds, you might have to use a DSLR or mirrorless with a long lens. The only way to get this effect using a smartphone is to get very close with the phone, or use a depth of field adapter plus long lens. Adding teleconversion lenses like Moment or other makes just won't add any significant shallow depth of field. Again, due to the small sensor size, smartphone cameras are not so good in low light situations. This means when you increase the ISO to brighten the image, you often get more video noise in the image. In 2020, most of the major phone makers will be releasing new models, and new models tend to bring new specs and new innovations, but we'll have to wait until the middle of 2020 for more of those. It also looks as if smartphones are reaching the limits of quality, but perhaps there will be new science which opens up opportunities in the future. It's good to remember that a film selected for one of the biggest film festivals in the world was shot with two iPhone 5s. The iPhone's video quality has improved, but mainly down to software AI features, but not by a huge amount. The advantages of newer phones are increased memory, increased resolution options, and higher processing power. I've never actually owned an iPhone, nor do we have anything to gain really from promoting Apple products. However, most films we receive at Momo are still shot on iPhones, and probably for good reason. If we had to choose one smartphone to film with, the iPhone would still, just about edge out the competition. While other phone makers focus on the stills capability of their devices, Apple pay just a little bit more attention to the video side of things too. The AI in recent iPhones does an amazing job at adding dynamic range to your video. For example, preventing the sky from blowing out, doing better even than a Blackmagic DSLR. The iPhone also integrates better with third-party camera apps such as FiLMiC Pro. Apple even invited FiLMiC to speak during the launch of their new iPhone 11 and iPhone 11 Pro and the Pro Max. Take note, you don't have to use the latest iPhone to get great-looking video. Oscar-winning Steven Soderbergh shot a feature film with an iPhone 7 Plus and another with an iPhone 8 Plus. So it seems that if you ask the real pros, the iPhone is indeed the best smartphone for video recording. The Sony Xperia 1 is an Android phone made by a company that also makes cinema-grade cameras. But unlike Red, Sony have made a smartphone that is great for shooting video, as well as being functional in everyday use. The phone is elongated to give a widescreen cinematic viewing experience. But more important for smartphone filmmakers is Sony's own Cinema Pro app. The new Cinema Pro app gives you extensive manual control without the need for third-party apps. This means no worrying whether FiLMiC Pro will provide manual control without glitches. The Sony app lets you shoot at the wide 21:9 ratio with a range of manual settings such as frame rate, white balance, lens size, shutter speed, and resolution. Having said that, the Xperia 1 also works well with FiLMiC Pro 2. From what I have seen, the Xperia 1 works well in low light conditions as well. The cameras and sensors are on a level with Samsung's phones, but with the added Cinema Pro app providing manual control, which is essential for good quality video. DxOMark claim that the Xperia 1 is a poorer performer in low light conditions, but that is not what I'm seeing from sample videos. In some respects, the Xperia 1 outperforms or equals the Samsungs. Recording professional video on your smartphone is still a niche activity, which is perhaps why the Sony Xperia 1 has slipped under the radar a little bit, and maybe why it doesn't come up on too many other best smartphone for video recording lists. Take note though, Sony have just released the Xperia 5, which is about £150 cheaper than the Xperia 1. The phone appears to be almost the same, except smaller, so you'll get a similar filmmaking experience for less, about £350 less than an iPhone 11 Pro, and about £400 less than the Samsung Galaxy S10 5G. Well-known smartphone camera testers DxOMark recently gave the Samsung S10 Plus 5G the highest mark for any phone when shooting video. The Samsung S10 Plus 5G is a pretty big phone, or phablet, which may not suit your needs. However, any of the recent Samsung phones will do a great job when shooting video. They perform best in terms of natural color produced and in low light situations. On the downside, Samsung recently decided to remove Pro mode when shooting video. Previously, Samsung users had a full range of manual controls, but now they have none. Well, depending on the model and operating system. Third-party camera apps work pretty well with Samsung devices, providing manual control, but some issues do remain. Now, this is what FiLMiC say. They say that there is currently no access to tele-lens on any Samsung devices. Also note that if you want to shoot 4K at 60 frames per second, FiLMiC cannot do so with devices using Snapdragon. Exynos, however, is okay. This means Samsung phones with Snapdragon cannot have both manual control and 4K at 60 frames per second. Now, I've used Samsung S8, S8 Plus and S9 smartphones for filmmaking myself, and I do find them to work really well. I haven't had too many problems, especially once you add a third-party camera app, so you don't necessarily need the latest Samsung model. Another thing to note is that Samsung are one of the first to introduce this fake depth of field for video. Called live focus, this depth of field mimicker attempts to mask people and then apply blur to the rest of the image. While this works quite well in photos, in video the AI struggles to work out what should be blurred, and that results in the blurred effect kind of jumping around the image a bit, pretty sort of random, so it doesn't look that great. But all in all, I'd still say the Samsungs are one of the best smartphone makes for shooting video. OnePlus smartphones have been great for shooting video for a while now. Recently, the OnePlus 7 Pro improved on the quality of previous models. Again, OnePlus are a company who actively promote their devices as the best smartphone for video recording. Now, the OnePlus 7 Pro has a triple camera setup with a 26mm equivalent lens with f1.6 aperture and OIS, which is optical image stabilization inbuilt. They also have a 17mm equivalent lens with f2.2 aperture and a 78mm equivalent tele lens with f2.4 aperture and OIS again. This phone also excels for fine detail preservation from its 4K footage capture at default settings. The autofocus system also performs well. Now, this is what FiLMiC Pro says about the OnePlus range. Many devices are prone to substantial chroma noise, especially in low light. Additionally, we cannot access frame rates above 30 frames per second, nor tele lenses on most OnePlus devices. So that's just something else to bear in mind there, considering that manual control of your smartphone video camera is pretty vital to shooting professional standard video. Google have recently released the Pixel 4 and Pixel 4 XL. Although the Google Pixel phones are rated well by DxOMark for video, we have found they do have a weakness when it comes to low light filming. Feedback says that the Pixel phones introduce more noise than other phones, even when pulling down the ISO using a third-party app. As far as we can tell from the recent models of the Pixel phone, Google haven't done much to their Pixel cameras apart from adding more lenses. Ultimately, Google, like many other Android smartphone manufacturers, have focused their camera features on shooting still images. When it comes to video, they aren't thinking that much beyond the casual user who wants to shoot quick clips of their family or friends. A note from FiLMiC Pro says that while Pixel 1 and 2 smartphones work well with their app, the Pixel 3 series devices currently contain some instabilities at high frame rates and also exhibit some audio framework errors that become apparent when playing back footage on a desktop machine. With lenses made by Leica, the Huawei devices have had rave reviews from all over. While they may be awesome for still photos, for shooting video, they're just not that great, at least compared to the other high-priced top-range smartphones. With low-light issues and artifacts created by the Huawei AI and other software, they can't quite be included as a superior device for filmmaking. FiLMiC Pro also say most Huawei devices do not properly support frame rates below 30 frames per second. As such, we do not offer 24 and 25 frames per second configurations with FiLMiC Pro on devices containing this issue. So, when it comes to having manual control, Huawei shooters will be without the 24 frames per second film look frame rate. All that negativity aside, the top Huawei phones such as the P30 Pro do produce good video, their autofocus and inbuilt stabilization being particularly useful. However, these strengths are part of its weaknesses when you just want manually controlled software-free video. If you're intending to shoot video on the fly and want immediate results, a Huawei might be for you. However, if you intend to spend time editing, grading, adding your own stabilization in post and so on, well, you're probably better off with one of the other top devices. Those are the top 6 smartphone brands for shooting video, if you have no budget restrictions. Although, you don't need to purchase the latest model to shoot great video. That said, if you want a new smartphone and don't want to spend so much, there are alternatives. One of the best budget smartphones for shooting video is the Xiaomi Pocophone f1. DxOMark rates it highly, as do FiLMiC Pro themselves. So if you're looking for manual controls, well, you can't really do much better than a recommend from the leading third-party camera app makers. The Xiaomi may not be the best smartphone for video recording, but it could be a great compromise between quality and cost. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.